this is Becky Nunn. I'm going to show you how you can use these Apero bracelets to create a colorized resin that looks like a faux porcelain when you add a little bit of crystal clay in there and then you colorize them with resin. So the first step is we're going to take these bracelets apart because I find that it's easiest to work with the single links like this. These pieces I've already taken apart. So let me go ahead and show you how easy this is. You want to use a pair of needle nose pliers. Just go right inside of that loop right there with your needle nose pliers and lift up gently like that, and then these pieces will all just slide out of that piece. You open it a little bit more, and then you'll have individual links that you'll take all apart. The next step, after you've taken the bracelet all apart, is you're going to clean these bezels. All of these Apero bracelets, these are stamped with brass, and then we're plating these with 24 karat gold, copper, and 0.99 fine silver. Then we oxidize them to give them this blackened sort of look. This blackened look we want to have come off when we're about ready to pour the resin in over the crystal clay, because we just don't want it to alter the color at all. So using a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip, just go ahead and dip the Q-tip into the rubbing alcohol and clean the bezels. So you can see it comes off fairly easy with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Just go ahead and clean all the links from your piece. I actually clean the outsides too, because I often, my fingers get on this and I can also transfer onto the clay fairly easily. So I'm just wanting my work surface to be very clean. These pieces that are down inside here, those are going to be covered up, and if they're not coming off with rubbing alcohol, chances are they're just simply not going to come off unless you have like a toothpick and you go inside of there and clean up. Alright, so once you have your rubbing alcohol and you've cleaned up your pieces, you're going to want to mix a little bit of crystal clay. Crystal clay comes in a variety of packages and sizes and colors. We're going to be working with the white. It comes packaged like this, and it'll show that there's a part A and part B within each pack. Go ahead and pinch off 2 size balls. For this bracelet I did about, let's see, what is that, like a grape size, a small grape size of the A and B. When you receive your package, or if you've opened it and then stored it and your A is hard, you can go ahead and put it inside of a Ziploc bag and put it under some hot water, and this will soften up a little bit. You should be wearing gloves when this part B is in its form like this, but as you can see I'm not, and just mix these 2 parts together. This A is pretty hard, so look a little bit more challenging than if it was a soft ball. So I'm just going to mix these 2 pieces together until they are fully blended. I'm just using the palms of my hands, turning it over. The crystal clay, once it's activated, you have about 90 to 120 minutes to work with it, and then once you've passed that time period, it starts to get really hard. That white that I'm working with was really kind of hard to start with, so this is a lot harder than if it was. I know in this package this is very soft. I was storing some of the things that I've found, that when I'm storing a package that I've already opened, it's really helpful to store the part A in one bag and the part B in a separate bag, just so that there's not any way in which they can continue to possibly activate one another and get hard. Also, I found that when you're working with the brown or the black, they have a lot more pigment in the clay, and so it tends to get on your hands more. I'm working with the white, and the white doesn't get on my hands very much at all. All right. So you can see that now I have my my part A and my part B all mixed together, and this is a lot more. It's a lot more soft. So, all right. So now I have my 2 balls of clay. I'm just rolling it into a ball. I can tell already this is going to be a lot more than I'm going to need for these 5 pieces. Once your clay is mixed together and you've made a nice round ball with the clay, I would suggest pinching off a small pea-sized ball like this and rolling that in your palm to get it to be nice and smooth. Then I suggest pinching off a second sized ball . You're eventually going to want to have all of your clay that's in the bezels be about the same amount of clay. So what I'm doing is I'm pinching off a second sized ball just so I can have kind of a reference of about the size of the balls that I'm making. Then I'm going to do a test. I'm going to go ahead and put one of the balls into the bezel to see if I have about the right amount of clay. I've done this a couple times, and so I wanted to show you that you know, I have a pretty good eye of how much clay is going to be in there, but for when you are starting out, you'll want to just know that was that ball too much. Like if I had way too much clay inside of this bezel, it wouldn't be nice and flat. We want it to be a fairly flat surface like that, so when we rubber stamp on there, it'll be nice and flat, and then when we put the resin on the top, we have a nice flat surface. So I knew I had probably about the right amount, but now that we're sure that we have the right amount, go ahead and make, let's see, 1, 2, 3, so 3 more balls about that size. Again, just to make all of the balls consistent. This is just an easy way to do it. Ball number 2. Ball number 3. That one might be a little bit bigger, but you kind of get these are pretty much the same size. All right, I like to wash my hands quite frequently when I'm working with this clay because it's easy to get it on my fingertips and such, and then it gets on the bezels themselves. So just getting in the habit of always wiping your fingers is helpful. And then make sure that they're dry before you pick up the clay again. Alright, so the next thing is you're just going to go ahead and put all of the balls. It's easiest if this ball is nice and smooth and doesn't have a crease on it. It's easiest to get a nice surface and not have that crease show up on the surface and have to get it out. So just make your ball nice and smooth and pat it in. For the life of me, I can't prevent stuff getting in the clay. The only thing I can think of is that either I had something on my hands or it just gets in the clay, but it happens. Little fibers get in there. What you can do, if you have something that you just can't live with, you can go in with a toothpick and just kind of pick that out and then pat, smooth that surface area again. Alright, so with the other 3 balls, just continue to fill up the bezels and then we'll be ready to go to the next step. Alright, once you have all of your bezels filled with the crystal clay, just double check that you have that nice flat surface that we're looking for. If you have a big dome on there, you can pinch off some of the clay like this and remove it and then pat down the surface to be nice and smooth. And that is also true if you have too little in there. You're going to want to make sure that it's somewhat flush, because if there's not enough clay inside of there, you will have a little bit of a challenge of getting your rubber stamp to imprint onto the piece. So that's how you can add or remove clay. It's just by pinching it off. After you're done with all of that, you might want to take a wet wipe and just wipe down your bezels. These tend to cure the clay. It cures up in about 90 to 120 minutes, and it's like cement. So go ahead and clean your bezels as you go along, just to make sure that they're nice and clean, and you don't have to worry about that stuff hardening. Next thing we're going to do is take the Stays On ink, and we're going to test to see that the pad is fairly inked prior to stamping on the actual bezel. So just get your stamp loaded with some ink and do a test on a piece of paper just to make sure that your ink is fully saturated on the pad. Then once you know that your ink pad is looking good and your stamp is looking good, go ahead and ink up. Whoa, ink up. And then just bring it right up to the side and press down. Not too hard, just hard enough. And you'll have a nice impression on the clay. If you don't like that impression, you can do the same thing that I showed you before. You can just pinch this off. Like if you want to have this come down a little bit more, you can either take a wet wipe and try to get some of that ink off, like this. Or you could also pinch off or add to the clay. This is one of the things that I like about this technique. For those of you who are, nervous about trying something new, you can try it, and if it didn't work out well, just go ahead and remove the ink. If it's not removing very easily, pinch it off or put a little bit more clay over the surface of that. Then once you have it all cleaned up, make sure that your edges are nice and clean again, and then go ahead and stamp again until you have 5 impressions that you like. And let that one sit for a little bit while I do the next one. If you don't like this right here, you can go ahead and get a little toothpick, or maybe even take this off over here using a Q-tip. So these are ways in which that you can fix your pieces if you don't like how the rubber stamped, or if you didn't get enough of an impression all the way that first time, you can re-ink up your stamp, take a look at where the design is, and then do another little bit right down in that area. So you can do all kinds of fun things to fix your stamped clay if it doesn't look like a design that you would like. And that is by either wiping it away with the wet wipes or using a Q-tip to wipe away the design, and then continuing to stamp onto the pieces until you have 5 designs that work for you. I went ahead and stamped all of my 5 pieces, and I'm finished with this part. So go ahead and put your Stays On cap back on. I highly recommend that you store your ink pads upside down so it brings that ink to the surface. And after you get done stamping, make sure that you wipe your ink rubber stamps off, removing the ink and also any crystal clay that might have gotten into the stamp. We're going to use some of the Nunn Design resin. I'm going to mix this up. So we have a part A and a part B. I like to have a piece of plastic down on my table first. I'll lay that down. I have a mixing cup and a mixing paddle. I used this side, and so I let it dry. Now I can use this side. And we'll need our timer. So I have a little timer handy and ready to go. So first we're going to take the part A, and we're going to fill up the resin cup to the 1 tablespoon mark. And we're going to want to be very precise with the amount that we put in, because it needs to be a 1-to-1 ratio. So I like to get down next to the cup so I can see exactly when I hit that mark of where it hit that line, because the resin is very sensitive. If it's not an exact mix of 1-to-1, the resin will not harden correctly. So I'm just drizzling in the resin until I hit that line, and as I start to get really close to it, I kind of lighten up the pour, and right when I hit that line of where I know I'm right at that 1 tablespoon mark, I turn the bottle slightly and stop the pour, and then use a wet wipe to wipe away that excess resin on the lid. So that's the A, and you always pour part A in first. And then with part B, you're going to fill up to the 2 tablespoon mark. Same thing, get down eye level so I can see that line and know exactly when I hit it. When I start getting close to that line, I ease up on my pour and then turn the bottle and then clean off the lid area. Now you'll need 2 minutes of mixing. So go ahead and start the timer for 2 minutes, and then using stick. It's a really full cup, that's why I like to mix this on plastic. When it first starts mixing together, it'll kind of be a little bit milky, and then as it blends together, it'll turn clear. Scrape the sides as you go along, and then scrape the stick itself. And continue to stir for another 2 minutes. about 12 hours, 11 to 12 hours. These pieces they could be slightly tacky. I've waited a whole 24 hours to see the final results and to touch them. These are really hard. They will continue to cure for another 48 hours, so it's up to 72 hours of curing time on the resin. But we're ready to go ahead and assemble them. So I laid out my pieces on the table so I can kind of see the various designs that are stamped on there and how it would look the best. You can move it around to whatever design that you want to. And then I've brought back in all of the pieces from when we disassembled it, and I'm going to go ahead and show you how easy this is to put back together. So when we opened these up, we had the loops already in place. So go ahead, all of the ridged area will be on the top. You'll need a pair of needle nose pliers, and just thread the pieces back on, and then you just crimp down very simply, bing, and that closes that loop back up, and you're ready to go. I'm going to continue to assemble all of these pieces together, and we'll have the finished result. And there we have our finished bracelet. And I also created one in silver so you can see the difference, and the tail bracelet also comes in copper. This is Becky Nunn with Nunn Design. I'm showing you how you can make these fun rubber stamped crystal clay bracelets with colorized resin to create a faux porcelain look. Thanks!